Evan Carter never thought of himself as extraordinary. Sure, he worked on spaceships, which sounded exciting when he told people in passing, but his job aboard the Stellar Dawn was closer to janitorial duty than intergalactic adventure. As a junior mechanic, he spent his days recalibrating plasma conduits, scrubbing carbon residue off the thrusters, and dodging sarcastic remarks from Miles, the ship's grizzled head engineer. If the Stellar Dawn was a floating city, Evan's corner of it was the basement, hot, noisy, and thoroughly unglamorous. "Hey Carter," Miles's voice barked over the comms. "When you're done playing with that coolant valve, the starboard relay needs fixing. You know, in case you thought this was a vacation." "On it," Boss Evan muttered, rolling his eyes as he tightened a stubborn bolt. He had just finished repairing the valve when the floor beneath him vibrated sharply. Evan froze. That wasn't the usual hum of the ship's engines. A moment later, the lights in the aft engine bay flickered, and a low, electric hum filled the air. Evan squinted at the diagnostic panel, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He tapped it twice, just to be sure. "Great," he muttered, stuffing his tools into his bag. "If this is another system glitch, I'm charging overtime." He turned to leave but froze when he heard a voice behind him. "You're more than this, you know." Evan whipped around, clutching his hydro spanner like a weapon. A man stood at the edge of the engine bay, half hidden in the shadows. He was tall, with unkempt gray hair and a battered trench coat that looked older than the ship itself. His eyes, sharp and oddly luminous, seemed to study Evan like he was a puzzle waiting to be solved. "How'd you get in here?" Evan demanded, taking a step back. "This is a restricted area." The man tilted his head slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Restricted? Interesting choice of words, considering your situation." Evan tightened his grip on the hydrospanner. "Okay, look, if this is some kind of scam, save it. Security's 2 decks up, and I'm not afraid to call them." "I'm not here to scam you," the man said, stepping into the light. "I'm here to save you." "Save me," Evan repeated, raising an eyebrow. "From what?" "Miles chewing me out for being late." "From the people hunting you," the man said, his tone calm but unyielding. Evan blinked. The words were so absurd that for a moment he thought he'd misheard. "Hunting me," he said slowly. "Buddy, I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm just a mechanic." "No," the man said, his smile fading. "You're much more than that, Evan. You're the rightful heir to the Valorian Empire." Evan stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or call for help. "Right. And I'm also the king of Mars. Look, I don't know what you're selling, but..." The ship's intercom crackled to life, interrupting him. "All crew to your stations. Unauthorized personnel detected in the aft quadrant." Evan froze, his heart racing. "They've already found us," the man said grimly. "Who?" Evan demanded, panic creeping into his voice. The man didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed Evan's arm and pulled him toward the corridor. "Hey, what are you?" The deck plates shook violently, cutting him off. Somewhere down the hallway, the sound of blaster fire echoed, sharp and relentless. They ran until they reached an abandoned storage bay. Evan wrenched his arm free and spun to face the man, his chest heaving. "Start talking," he said, his voice edged with anger. "Who's shooting at us, and why is this suddenly my problem?" "The agents pursuing us are with the Galactic Conclave," the man said, his tone steady but urgent. "And it's your problem because they're after you." Evan laughed incredulously. "Me? Why? I don't even know what a Galactic Conclave is." "They're the governing body that oversees the galaxy," the man explained. "But their authority isn't absolute. They fear rebellion, and the Valorian Empire was the last great power to resist them. When your father was overthrown, they made sure the throne stayed empty." "My father," Evan said, his voice faltering. The man nodded. "Emperor David Cyril. He was betrayed and killed before you were born. Your mother took you to Earth to keep you safe. But now that the throne is vacant, the Conclave wants to ensure no one from your bloodline ever claims it." Evan stared at him, the weight of the words crashing down on him like a tidal wave. You're telling me my dad was some alien king, and that I'm supposed to what? Rule a galaxy? I can't even fix a coolant valve without Miles breathing down my neck. It's not about what you think you're capable of, the man said firmly. It's about who you are. The Valorian people need you, Evan, whether you're ready or not. And my mom, Evan asked, his voice quieter now. Did she know about all of this? The man's expression softened. She knew. She gave up everything to protect you. Evan felt a surge of anger and confusion. Then why didn't she tell me? Why let me grow up thinking my dad just walked out? She wanted you to have a normal life, the man said. If you'd known the truth, the Conclave would have found you long ago. Evan shook his head, his thoughts a chaotic mess. This is insane. I'm not a ruler. I'm not. Whatever you think I am. The man placed a hand on Evan's shoulder, his gaze unwavering. You are Evan. You just don't know it yet. My name is Alan Riker. I served your father as his advisor, and now I'm here to help you. Before Evan could respond, the door to the storage bay exploded inward. Two figures in sleek black armor stormed in, their weapons glowing with lethal energy. Alan pushed Evan behind a stack of crates. Stay down. Evan crouched, heart pounding, as Alan raised his hand. A surge of energy erupted from his palm, slamming into the attackers and sending them sprawling. Evan peeked over the crates, his eyes wide. What the hell was that? No time to explain, Alan said, pulling him toward the rear exit. We need to get to the hangar bay. Now. By the time they reached the hangar, alarms were blaring, and the air was thick with tension. Alan led Evan to a sleek black shuttle that looked like something out of a holofilm. Its sharp angles and faintly glowing surface seemed almost alive. Get in, Alan shouted. Evan hesitated for only a second before scrambling aboard. The interior was just as futuristic, with controls and displays glowing in a language he didn't recognize. Alan sealed the door behind them and slid into the pilot's seat. Buckle up, he said, firing up the engines. Evan barely had time to strap himself in before the shuttle shot out of the hangar, the stars outside blurring as Alan executed a series of dizzying maneuvers. Hang on, Alan yelled as a pursuing gunship fired, its blasts narrowly missing them. Evan clutched his seat, his mind reeling. He didn't know where they were going or what was waiting for him, but one thing was clear: his life was no longer ordinary. And it never would be again. The shuttle rocketed through space, streaks of light from distant stars stretching across the viewports. Evan gripped the armrests of his seat, his knuckles white. The hum of the ship's engines was soothing in a way, but it did little to calm the chaos in his mind. So Evan said, finally breaking the tense silence, "Are you going to tell me where we're going, or is this another trust me moment?" Alan glanced at him from the pilot's seat, his expression as calm as ever. "Corvalis," he said. Evan raised an eyebrow. "And what's on Corvalis?" "Let me guess, more people trying to kill me." "Hopefully not," Alan replied. "It's a neutral world, hidden from most galactic maps. A safe haven for now." Evan snorted. "Yeah, because neutral sounds so reliable right now." Alan didn't answer, his focus on the console. Evan leaned back in his seat, staring out at the swirling stars. His father had been an emperor. His mother had lied to him his entire life. And now, apparently, the galaxy wanted him dead because of who he was. "I'm supposed to believe all of this," Evan muttered, more to himself than to Alan. "Some ancient empire, secret lineage, superpowered alien blood. It's ridiculous." Alan didn't look up. "You can choose to believe or not. The galaxy doesn't care either way." Evan shot him a glare. "Helpful." The shuttle's console beeped, and Alan pressed a series of buttons. The streaks of light outside dissolved into a clear, star-speckled void. Ahead, a planet hung in the darkness, its surface a tapestry of green forests, shimmering blue oceans, and crystalline spires that sparkled like diamonds. "Welcome to Corvalis," Alan said. Evan leaned forward, his skepticism momentarily replaced by awe. Okay, he admitted. That's pretty cool. The shuttle descended into the atmosphere, skimming over lush landscapes dotted with strange, glowing flora. They landed on a flat, polished platform near the base of one of the massive spires. As the engines powered down, Evan hesitated, his hand on the release of his harness. What now? He asked. Now, Alan said, standing and opening the hatch, you learn who you really are. The interior of the spire was like stepping into a dream. The walls shimmered faintly, and the air hummed with a resonance Evan felt in his chest more than he heard. Strange symbols carved into the walls seemed to shift subtly when he looked away, and floating orbs of light drifted lazily through the space, casting an ethereal glow. Okay, Evan said, turning in a slow circle. This is officially the weirdest place I've ever been. You're not wrong, Alan replied, his boots clicking softly against the smooth floor. They entered a wide, circular chamber, its floor engraved with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with light. At the center stood a pedestal holding a crystalline orb. A woman stood beside it, her dark purple skin gleaming in the light. Her sharp, angular features were striking, but it was her eyes glowing softly like embers that made Evan stop short. Alan, she said, her voice smooth but firm. You're late. Good to see you too, Jana, Alan replied dryly. Jana turned her piercing gaze on Evan, and he felt like she could see straight through him. So this is the heir, she said, her tone laced with skepticism. Evan frowned. Nice to meet you too, I guess. Jana smirked faintly. He has spirit. That's something. Alan stepped between them. He needs guidance, Jana. The conclave is closing in, and he's unprepared. Jana studied Evan for a moment longer before nodding. Very well. Come, heir. It's time you understood the truth of your heritage. She gestured toward the crystalline orb on the pedestal. Evan eyed it warily. What's it do? Zap me. Implant some ancient wisdom in my brain. Place your hand on it, Jana said, ignoring his sarcasm. Evan glanced at Alan, who gave him an encouraging nod. With a sigh, he stepped forward and placed his hand on the orb. The moment his fingers touched the cool surface, a surge of energy shot through him. He gasped as images flooded his mind, towering cities of light, fleets of ships sailing through the stars, and a man who looked eerily like him, standing on a dais with a crown of silver light. That's him, Evan whispered, his voice trembling. That's my father. Daven Serial, Jana said, the last true emperor of the Valorian Empire. His blood flows in your veins, Evan. You are his legacy. Evan pulled his hand back, his breathing unsteady. This is too much. How am I supposed to live up to that? I'm just a mechanic. Jana's gaze softened, a rare crack in her otherwise steely demeanor. You're more than that. The power you felt just now? It's a part of you. It's been dormant, but it can awaken with training. Evan shook his head. I didn't sign up for this. I'm not a leader. I don't know the first thing about running an empire, let alone fighting a galactic conspiracy. Alan stepped forward, placing a hand on Evan's shoulder. You'll learn. You don't have to do this alone. Evan looked between them, the weight of their words sinking in. He didn't feel ready. He didn't feel capable. But the visions he'd seen, the sheer scale of what was at stake, made one thing clear. Whether he liked it or not, his life was no longer his own. Over the next few days, Evan's training began. Jana taught him to harness the energy within him, unlocking abilities he hadn't known were possible. He learned to heighten his awareness, to feel the flow of energy in the world around him, and to manipulate it with his will. It was exhilarating, but it was also exhausting. Focus, Jana said during one session, her tone sharp. I'm trying, Evan snapped, sweat dripping from his brow. Trying isn't enough, she replied. You're not just learning for yourself. You're learning for the millions of lives that depend on you. Evan scowled but pushed himself harder. At night, Alan worked with him on the political intricacies of the Valorian Empire, explaining the factions vying for power and the Conclave's relentless efforts to maintain control. They want you gone because you're a threat to their plans, Alan said, but you're also the only one who can unite the Valorian people. They need a leader. They need someone better than me, Evan muttered. They need you, Alan said firmly. Despite his doubts, Evan began to feel a shift within himself. The powers Jana had awakened were real, and his instincts long buried beneath years of ordinary life started to emerge. But one question gnawed at him, refusing to be silenced. I need to talk to her, Evan said one evening, pacing his quarters. Alan looked up from a datapad. Your mother. Evan nodded. She knew about all of this, didn't she? She's the only one who can give me answers. Alan hesitated, then sighed. It's dangerous. The Conclave could intercept the transmission. I don't care, Evan said, his voice firm. She deserves to know I'm alive, and I need to hear the truth from her. Alan studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll set up a secure channel. But we'll have to be quick. As Alan worked on the comms, Evan sat on the edge of his bed, his heart pounding. He didn't know what he would say, but he had to try. Because no matter how far he'd come, one truth remained: he couldn't move forward without understanding where he came from. The holographic comm unit flickered to life, and Evan's heart clenched as his mother's face appeared. She looked older than he remembered, her hair streaked with gray and fine lines marking the edges of her eyes. But those eyes, warm and kind, hadn't changed. Evan Sarah Carter's voice trembled, and her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, is it really you? Hey Mom, Evan said, his voice softer than he expected. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought I lost you. When the stellar dawn disappeared, I didn't know what to think. Are you all right? Where are you? I'm safe, Evan said hesitantly. For now. But I need answers, Mom. About Dad. About me. Sarah hesitated, her expression clouded with regret. Evan, You knew, didn't you? Evan interrupted, his voice rising. You knew everything, and you never told me. Sarah flinched but didn't look away. Yes, I knew. Your father told me everything before he sent us to Earth. He wanted to keep you safe, Evan. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Like what? Evan snapped. Me finding out I'm the heir to some alien throne because people are trying to kill me? You let me grow up thinking he abandoned us. I wanted to tell you, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face, but it was too dangerous. If anyone found out who you were, they would have come for you. They would have come for you. They would have come for both of us. Your father gave up everything to protect you, Evan. He loved you more than anything. Evan shook his head, frustration boiling over. You could have prepared me. You could have said something. Instead, I've spent my whole life thinking I was just nobody. You've never been nobody, Sarah said, her voice firm despite her tears. You're extraordinary, Evan. You always have been. Her words pierced through his anger, leaving him momentarily stunned. He ran a hand through his hair, his emotions a tangled mess. Tell me about him, Evan said after a long pause. About Dad. What was he really like? Sarah's face softened, a faint smile breaking through her sadness. He was brave, strong, but more than that, he was kind. He believed in justice, in doing what was right, even when it was hard. He never wanted power for its own sake. He wanted to use it to help people. That's why they feared him. Feared him, Evan asked. The factions that betrayed him, Sarah explained. They didn't want an emperor who cared about unity. They wanted control, and your father stood in their way. When they overthrew him, he could have fought back, but he chose to protect us instead. He gave up his life to keep you safe. Evan swallowed hard, his throat tight. And me. What do you think I'm supposed to do with all of this? I'm not him, Mom. I don't know how to be an emperor. The first don't even know how to be Valorian. You'll figure it out, Sarah said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. You're stronger than you think, Evan. You always have been. Alan's voice cut in. Evan, we need to disconnect. The Conclave might trace the signal. Wait, Evan said, turning back to the hologram. "Mom, I'll come back for you. I promise." "I know you will," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Stay safe, Evan. And remember, we're proud of you. Your father would be too." The connection cut off, and the room fell into silence. Evan didn't sleep that night. His mother's words replayed in his mind, mixing with everything Alan and Jana had told him. For years, he'd felt like a piece of his life was missing. Now that piece was back, but it didn't make him feel whole. If anything, it made him feel more fractured than ever. When morning came, Jana found him in the training chamber, practicing the exercises she'd taught him. "You're up early," she said, crossing her arms. Evan wiped sweat from his brow. "Couldn't sleep." "Understandable," she said. "Your entire worldview just shattered. Most people would have curled up in a corner by now." Evan chuckled dryly. "Not really an option, is it?" Jana studied him for a moment, then gestured for him to follow her. "Come. There's something you need to see." Jana led him to the spire's central chamber, where the crystalline orb he'd touched days earlier still rested on its pedestal. This time, however, the room was filled with holographic projections, maps of the galaxy, images of ships and planets, and streams of alien text Evan couldn't read. "What is all this?" Evan asked. "The state of your empire," Jana said. Evan frowned. "It's not my empire." "It is," Jana said firmly, "whether you accept it or not, and right now it's in chaos. The Syndicate of the Crimson Star, a militaristic faction that betrayed your father, has aligned itself with the Galactic Conclave. They plan to invade Corvalis and eliminate you." Evan's stomach tightened. "Invade? Here." Jana nodded. "They've grown bold. If they succeed, they'll claim the throne for themselves, and the Conclave will dismantle what's left of the Valorian Empire." Evan turned to Alan, who had entered the chamber behind them. "And what's your plan?" Alan met his gaze. You're the plan. If you declare your claim to the throne, the loyalist factions will rally to your side. Together we can repel the Syndicate and show the galaxy that the Valorian Empire still stands. Evan stared at him, the weight of the words sinking in. "You make it sound so easy. What if they don't believe me? What if they don't care?" "They'll care," Jana said. "The Valorian people have been waiting for a leader. You've seen what you're capable of, haven't you? The powers you've awakened, use them. Show them who you are." Evan hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't feel ready. But if what Alan and Jana said was true, he didn't have a choice. "All right," Evan said finally. "What do I have to do?" Alan smiled faintly. "First, we send a message." Hours later, Evan stood in the spire's central chamber, dressed in ceremonial Valorian armor. The intricate plates shimmered with a faint, otherworldly light, and the energy coursing through them seemed to resonate with his own. "Ready?" Alan asked. "No," Evan admitted. "But let's do it anyway." Alan activated the communication array, and a holographic projection of Evan appeared, broadcast across the galaxy. Loyalists, neutral factions, and even the Syndicate would see it. Evan cleared his throat, his nerves on edge. Hi," he began awkwardly, then winced. Greetings. My name is Evan Serial, and I'm the rightful heir to the Valorian throne." He paused, glancing at Alan, who gave him an encouraging nod. "My father, Emperor Davan Serial, sacrificed everything to protect me and give our people a chance at survival. I didn't grow up knowing who I was or what I was meant to do, but I'm learning. And I'm not going to let the Syndicate or the Conclave destroy what he fought to preserve." Evan stepped closer to the array, his voice growing stronger. "I'm calling on every Valorian who still believes in unity, in strength, and in hope to stand with me. Together we can stop the Syndicate and protect the future of our people. The Empire doesn't belong to the Conclave or to a faction. It belongs to us. And it's time we take it back." As the transmission ended, Evan exhaled, his heart pounding. "Not bad for your first royal decree," Alan said with a smile. Evan gave him a faint smile in return, but his mind was elsewhere. The battle was coming, and for the first time he began to believe he might be ready for it. The response to Evan's broadcast came faster than anyone had anticipated. Loyalist fleets began converging on Corvalis, their ships bearing the golden insignia of the Valorian Empire. Messages of support poured in from commanders and leaders who had long awaited the return of a rightful emperor. But not all the news was good. The Syndicate of the Crimson Star, aligned with the Galactic Conclave, was already mobilizing its forces. The message was clear: Corvalis would not stand uncontested. Evan stood on a balcony of the crystalline spire, watching as ships filled the skies above. His armor felt heavier than it had during the transmission, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Alan approached, his expression serious. The Syndicate fleet is larger than we expected. This won't be an easy fight. Of course not, Evan muttered. Why would it be? Alan placed a hand on his shoulder. You've already done the hard part, bringing them together. Now, you need to lead them. Evan turned to face him, frustration flickering in his eyes. Lead them into what? I'm not a military strategist, Alan. I barely know how to fly a shuttle. You don't need to be a strategist, Alan said firmly. You just need to inspire them. The Valorian people aren't just fighting for survival, they're fighting for their future. For you. Evan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if I'm ready. No one ever is, Alan said. But your father believed in you. Your mother believes in you. And so do I. Evan nodded slowly, the weight of Alan's words settling over him. All right, let's do this. The Loyalist fleet assembled in the upper atmosphere of Corvalis, a dazzling array of ships ranging from nimble fighters to massive capital vessels. At the center of it all was a sleek black flagship called the Radiant Dawn, its design both elegant and intimidating. Evan stood on the command deck, surrounded by a flurry of activity. Officers relayed reports, technicians monitored holographic displays, and Janice stood by his side, her expression sharp and focused. They're here, she said, pointing to a large holographic map. Evan's stomach tightened as the Syndicate fleet emerged from hyperspace. Their ships were jagged and menacing, their engines glowing with an ominous red light. At the head of the fleet was the Crimson Wrath, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons. They outnumber us, Janice said, but we have the advantage of positioning. Evan stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the map. What's the plan? Janice smirked faintly. You're the Emperor. You tell us. Evan shot her a glare, but she simply raised an eyebrow. Taking a deep breath, he turned to Alan. What's our best option? Alan pointed to the map. The Syndicate will try to overwhelm us with brute force. If we divide their fleet, we can outmaneuver them. Use our faster ships to draw their fighters away while our capital ships focus on the Crimson Wrath. Evan nodded, his confidence growing. All right, let's do it. Split the fleet and bait their fighters. And make sure everyone knows they're fighting for more than just Corvalis. They're fighting for their future. The battle that followed was nothing short of chaos. Evan's plan worked initially, with Loyalist fighters drawing the Syndicate's smaller ships away. The capital ships engaged the Crimson Wrath, their weapons lighting up the void with bursts of energy. But the Syndicate forces were relentless, and the Loyalists found themselves pushed to the brink. Evan watched the battle unfold from the Radiant Dawn, his heart pounding with every report of losses. He felt powerless, a spectator in a war that he was supposed to lead. We're losing ground, Janice said, her voice tense. Evan clenched his fists, his mind racing. He thought back to his training with Janna, the lessons she'd drilled into him about harnessing his Valorian abilities. Patch me through to the fleet, he said suddenly. Alan hesitated. Evan, what are you? Just do it, Evan snapped. Alan nodded and activated the comms. Evan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. This is Evan's serial, he said, his words echoing across the fleet. To every ship out there, every pilot, every crew member, you're not just fighting for Corvalis. You're fighting for the Valorian Empire, for a chance to rebuild what was lost, for a future where we're united, not divided. They want us to give up. They want us to fail. But we won't. Not today. Evan closed his eyes, focusing on the energy within him. He reached out, letting his awareness flow through the fleet. He could feel the fear and determination of the loyalist crews, the raw, chaotic emotions of battle. And he pushed back. A wave of calm and resolve spread through the fleet, like a flame reigniting after being snuffed out. The loyalists rallied, their formations tightening as they pressed the attack. On the bridge of the Radiant Dawn, Janice stared at Evan in awe. You just. Focus, Evan said, cutting her off. We're not done yet. The turning point came when the Crimson Wrath's shields faltered. Loyalist capital ships unleashed a devastating barrage, tearing through the Syndicate dreadnought's defenses. As the Crimson Wrath exploded in a brilliant flash, the remaining Syndicate forces began to retreat. Cheers erupted across the fleet, but Evan remained focused, his gaze fixed on the holographic map. Don't let them regroup, he said. Press the advantage. Make sure they can't come back. The Loyalists pursued the retreating Syndicate ships, ensuring their defeat was complete. When the battle finally ended, the Loyalist fleet returned to Corvalis, victorious but battered. Evan stood before the gathered leaders of the Loyalist factions, still wearing his battle-worn armor. The room was filled with a sense of hope and unity that hadn't been felt in years. You've proven yourself, Evan Serial, one of the leaders said. You've shown us what it means to lead. Evan took a deep breath, his voice steady as he addressed the assembly. This isn't about me, he said. It's about us. The Valorian Empire isn't just a throne or a title, it's our people. Together we can rebuild what was lost. Together we can stand against anyone who tries to divide us. The chamber erupted in applause, and for the first time Evan felt like he truly belonged. As the crowd dispersed, Alan approached him with a small smile. Your father would be proud. Evan looked out at the stars beyond the spire. I hope so. He thought of his mother waiting for him on Earth, and vowed to bring her here one day to show her the legacy she had helped protect. For now, though, his path was clear. Evan Serial, half human, half Valorian, was no longer ordinary. He was a monarch, and his story was just beginning.